Okay, good morning, everybody. I think we'll have some more participants join us as they connect, but welcome to our third Paly TGIF. And the hottest topic today is, of course, reopening. We had several questions come in the form that was published. So I am going to purposely disable chat through the early part of this presentation. We have a number of really good questions that we want to try and get answers to from Principal Klein. And if there is some time available towards the end, we'll definitely open up chat and get your questions at that point. We are also, I wanted to highlight that we are working on an updated Paly FAQ. I have a draft ready for review, and we will try very hard to get that out sometime today by early afternoon at the latest. And I think that will address many of the questions that we're hearing about how the reopening plan is being modeled and what it would look like and some of the outlying parameters. So stay tuned. And with that, I'll hand it over to Principal Klein to get started.
Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday, November 13th. Thank you all for being here, and another attempt to answer any questions or concerns that you have. Just want to give you a heads up too that I'm needing to leave at 9 o'clock so I can shift over. I'm going to be holding a webinar for all of our students this morning to share with them the plan and to provide any clarification. I'm sharing with you, this is a one-page document. If you've already read the community update that was sent yesterday, you should have seen it in there. I'm just trying to kind of simplify things a little bit more so that we can help address any questions or concerns. I'll just kind of highlight, so we're looking at the two options, option one, which is the hybrid, and then option two, which is the distance learning. And just again, just repeating here a little bit, the two courses that will be focused on the hybrid instruction will be English and history, and students will be coming to school 2 times a week in cohorts, and then the rest of their day, whether it's before lunch or after lunch, will be done at home distance learning. Students are going to be blocked into 3 different cohorts, and those are either periods 1 and 2, period 3 or 4, or period 6 or 7. And if the unfortunate thing, if a student does get sick, if they did have an exposure to something that is keeping them out of school for 2 weeks, but did not affect the cohort, then that individual student will stay home and work one-on-one with the teacher through Schoology, emailing, so on and so forth, for acquiring the work. So then the option 2 is basically continuation of what we're doing currently via Zoom, and students will remain home for all of their courses. The SJP and team will be distance learning. So if students are in those 2 groups, they need to pick distance learning. If that's not what they want to do, they can always opt out for a year, and they are welcome back next year in those 2 groups. The similarities is that both options will be taught by PAUSD certificated teachers. There is a chance that there might be a different teacher than first semester. Our goal is to keep year-long courses the same per student, meaning the same course and the same teacher. It might be a different period, but our goal is to keep as much intact as possible. Looking at, we might have to reevaluate. And again, we don't know until we have the numbers here. And I'm just trying to give you the worst case scenario is that we might need to collapse a couple English or history, social science electives. But that is just preliminary. I don't know that until I actually know exactly which students are going to pick which model. Both students will be, groups will be on the same bell schedule, and advisory will remain with their same teacher, and it'll be remote. Just some more considerations to think about for the hybrid learning is that families will be required to submit daily health screeners information prior to arriving on campus through Parent Square, and students will not be allowed on campus unless that if that has not been done, they have to get it completed before they come to campus. There will be students, the cohorts are either in groups of 30 or 60, depending upon our staffing and how we can figure out the groupings that are going to be necessary based off the student need. If a student or a teacher is sick in one of these cohorts and has exposed the entire cohort, then the entire cohort will be quarantined for 14 calendar days, and the instruction will
Brent, could you please unmute yourself? Because we just had to mute everybody again. Brent, hello? Brent, could you unmute yourself?
I got it. I had to get from one screen to the next. Where was I muted at? Do you remember? Can you hear me, Charlie?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I can't hear Charo. Yeah, so I think, it's pretty clearly written there. I think, I don't know if I need to keep going through that, but there's definitely some articulated processes and expectations that students are going to have to follow, including keeping their masks on, including following the path that will be designated from one class to the next. And per county policy, students participating in the hybrid learning model are to be enrolled in only one extracurricular program outside of school. And that is a guideline that they have presented to schools in our area. So that is the quick.
Great. Brent, might help just to keep that up. And we'll go into some of the Q&A that came in from the forum. And we've gone through almost 200 comments and questions that have come through and tried to group them. And, so we're going to first start there. If we have some time before Mr. Klein has to leave, we will definitely open up chat and try and address some of those things. So first of all, Brent, about the extracurricular activities, since you just were talking about that, does a school sport count in that county rule, in that one activity rule? And is there any concern that if a student chooses hybrid, that they won't be able to play Paly sports?
That is considered one of the programs, a school extracurricular or sports, and there is no concern if between a distance learning and a hybrid student in terms of playing in a sport.
Okay, so a kid could do hybrid, a high school sport at our school, plus an extracurricular activity outside of school.
Correct.
Okay. Let me just do a few questions that came in. Could you clarify about the days at home and where a hybrid student would not be coming to campus? What does that learning look like?
If that's the individual student or the whole cohort?
No, the individual student. Like, is it asynchronous? Is it synchronous learning? What is happening with their other classes?
So if a hybrid student is sick at home and let's say they are being quarantined or even an illness that is extended more than a week, the two hybrid classes will be treated just like a student is, in a normal year. If you're homesick, you would work individually with a teacher, and teachers would use Schoology for communication of assignments and such, and students would work one-on-one with that teacher. And then they could still attend the rest of their distance learning classes the rest of the day, but we're treating it just like a home illness.
Okay. What is the timeline of knowing the teacher assignments? I mean, typically we would not get our schedules and teachers until a few days before school starts. So will we know that by mid-December?
That's our goal. The data won't be available until after the 18th, and we're going to work fast and furious to work through that to identify scheduling options and what we can do and communicate that to parents and students as soon as possible.
Okay. Are there staggered start dates? Principal Grierson for JLS mentioned a staggered model where January 7th and 8th would be asynchronous days, and then 6th grade 1 week, and then 7th and 8th grade the following week. Just wondering if we're doing something similar in high school.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we weren't considering that. I know that they wanted to really have a big focus on their incoming 6th graders because the change from elementary to middle school is a big deal. You know, right now, my assistant principals are speaking with the ILs, and we will continue to work in partnership with our building and teacher leadership to come up with these sorts of ideas. So I don't have that final answer yet, but we weren't planning on doing staggered starts.
If either model is oversubscribed, could you tell us a little bit about how the lottery would work? Is there any sibling priority, even for the same block schedule on campus? Are there any reserved seats for any of our other programs, Positive Plus, VTP, any other groups?
Yeah, I know at the school board meeting that was mentioned about identifying the students that are struggling and really work with them to you know, see which option and encourage them if they feel like they need more one-on-one to select the hybrid. I think that's going to be on a case by case, and we need to work not only with the counseling team but the administration team and teacher leadership to identify those kids that we might want to focus on to ensure that they select that model. You know, the lottery piece is there's still some details to work out. The consideration of siblings is something that I will have discussions with. I don't have an answer for you at this point, but that does make a lot of sense to consider something like that.
Okay. We'll take questions at the end. Can everybody please stay muted? What would you suggest to parents if their student doesn't follow? Giselle, Carl, can you mute everybody, please? Thanks. Brent, what would you suggest to parents where their student may not fall into one of the recognized categories, but may be struggling emotionally? How should they work with the administration? What should they do? How should they sort of identify that need to be in person?
I mean, you know, the obvious first one is to, you know, to select that one, and I'm believing that we will have enough room to serve all of those that need to come onto the campus for the 2 periods of learning. You know, if there is special circumstances, I would suggest that you reach out to your assistant principal, grade level, or myself, quite frankly, and to send me an email and a note. I think that we need to be sensitive to everybody's needs and have considerations for all kids, especially those that are struggling, especially without interaction. And if that's something that's desperately needed, we need to talk about that. I think we need to be as accommodating as possible.
Principal Klein, what role are our advisors playing in the selection process? And I think the same question goes back to our grade level counselors as well.
Yeah, again, once we're going to have to wait and see who, you know, the number of students that we have that want this particular model. And I think that the evaluation and the recommendations from the student TAs or the counseling team need to be brought into the mix because I think it's important to make sure that we're addressing the needs of students that are struggling more so than others. So I think that we need to include the human factor in this and really use all resources that we can to identify these cohorts. Okay.
I think it'd be helpful to clarify kind of how teachers might change and how they might not change. And maybe, I don't know if you could put some probabilities against things, but I think there's kind of the obvious English and social studies classes, but how might the teacher changes impact other areas? And maybe you could talk a little to that.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of things in the mix. We need to identify the students that want to participate in either program, and we also need to speak with our individual teachers and their personal concerns or willingness, and hopefully collaborating, working together so that we can create schedules that accommodate all people. There's going to be some situations, and probably more so in English and social studies, where we might see some teacher changes, but we're seriously looking as much as possible to keep the same student-teacher relationships. I know that's not going to be entirely possible, but we're going to try our best. I don't foresee a lot of other changes out there in other subjects, but it might happen just because of scheduling restraints as we get further into the process. So yeah, and so really the answer is, like, it's hard to tell you until we actually start looking at who we have and putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. A master schedule is a very complicated thing. I know with just a single student that has 7 requests, then you add 2,100 of those same student requests, and it becomes a very complicated puzzle. And I know that we have some strong experts here, including myself, that's done master scheduling for quite a number of years, and I believe that we will be able to create something that'll work for everybody. It's not going to be easy, I'm going to tell you that, but we're doing our best.
I just want to highlight an idea that came through from the forums, which I actually thought would be a really nice idea to implement, speaking as a parent of a junior. But would it be possible to do something like students who are choosing students in either model basically identify maybe 2 or 3 teachers that they absolutely want to keep? And maybe that'll just help inform scheduling. And I kind of bring this up in terms of addressing what the junior class has been saying about college reference letters. And, so out of the 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 classes that students take, could we give them the opportunity to maybe identify at least a couple of teachers that they really want to keep?
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, something definitely to consider, and it makes sense.
Okay. Let's see. Could you talk a little bit about the class sizes for distance and how those might increase? What is the cap? Will this just be English and humanities classes? Is this even allowed under state guidelines?
Well, I mean, the class sizes won't get above 39. That's our cap that we've been told. And it is acceptable in terms of what the agreement is with the contract and such. And we're going to try our best again to hopefully not get to that point. And we're not going to be able to tell again until we have the numbers to identify the number of sections that we have.
If we do see classes rise to that level, will teachers get any extra support? Will they have aides or markers or additional people that can be used to support those classes?
I'm sure that we will come up with ideas for support. Quite honestly, that conversation has not happened all the way yet, so we haven't got to that point.
Okay. And if this was another idea, if a distance student is forced to change teachers or have a large number of students in their class, would the administration guarantee the student's second semester grade is no worse than the first semester's grade?
I haven't. I can't guarantee that.
Okay.
That's not any agreement that's been talked about.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about what the hybrid classes might look like? Several teachers at the board meeting indicated that hybrid classes may still rely heavily on online work, as teachers will want to limit discussion conversation to limit possible aerosol spread.
Yeah, I've gone and visited our elementary schools that have opened with students in it, and I see students talking with each other. I see students talking with teachers, and I saw no computers on a table. And so I think it's just a process of working through what options are out there and seeing what the possibilities are and how teachers that have worked through this model. I know that, comparing high school to elementary is difficult, but it's a classroom with students in it and with students 6 feet apart, and they had their partitions, but they were also still able to interact and to learn, and the teacher was teaching, and it was, so I think that we just need to experience it and talk more about what the possibilities are.
Okay. And kind of that gets to one of the questions around what the setup in the room will be like. We've definitely heard that the ventilation makes the room really loud and cold. Is that true? Maybe you could just give us a better sense of the physical space and what that would look like. And also bathrooms, and how are those being sanitized?
Okay. Well, I've not been, and I mean, we're in the process of getting them set up, and it's hard for me to tell you exactly what it feels like in a room at this point, because I haven't stood in a room or sat there for a long time at this point. I know that the current HVAC system at Paly, there's areas that are newer than others that are working fine, and just the replacements to the MERV 13 filters and such, and some will have some portable air filtration systems in it. So I think that's, I can't tell you exactly if it's cold or noisy in there, because we need to experience that first. Bathrooms would be identified most likely by cohorts, and so that cohorts are assigned specific areas.
Sorry. Could you tell us a little bit about what happens if Santa Clara County moves to red tier or purple tier, before January 7th, and maybe what happens after?
It's a great question, and who knows? I'm sure we're back to distance learning on if that's the case, we're currently a lot of my thinking is in creating our idea right now, and I'm sure as I continue through conversations at the district level, I'll have better answers in case this happens. So I don't have that clear answer for you today.
Okay, would the possibility be like, will you keep our existing master schedule with whatever updates are needed for semester classes as a backup plan if we're back in purple before January 7th?
Right. I'll get you that answer. I'm not going to answer that right now because I haven't had that discussion at the district level yet.
Sure. Is there a trigger point to continue with this hybrid plan? Like, do you need a minimum enrollment to actually go forward with this?
We haven't considered a minimum enrollment in the conversations that we had, and I'm under the belief that we're going to serve the students and families that want to participate in this particular model.
Okay. Talked about this. Could you talk about why English and social studies classes? And also in social studies, you spoke to history, but as we get into junior and senior year, a lot of our humanities classes are econ, psych, things like that. Are those also being offered in hybrid?
Yes, I mean, our plan is to offer the same courses that we have currently. If we have some scheduling constraints, we'll be working with that individual group of that individual student or groups of students to communicate that and to look at other options. Social studies and English were selected because that was the two consistent content areas that traveled from 9th grade to 12th grade. And also we had a greater level of flexibility in terms of class sizes and teacher assignments in those particular areas.
Okay. So I know we're coming up on time. It looks like tutorial will be shorter. Are there other office hour opportunities being looked at?
Yeah, we're looking at, we're having conversations right now about what Mondays look like, because that will be decided on each school level. And that could be an area that we increase office hours for each department.
Okay. And is there any possibility that the Monday will actually move to Wednesday? Or is it always going to be on that Monday?
I believe it's going to stay on Monday.
Okay. And then definitely questions around small group activities and, what are the opportunities, particularly in science and math? This is a comment that has come up frequently and a piece of feedback that has come up frequently. How can we even now have some in-person activities and academic supports in these areas?
And that's, again, a conversation that's happening actually right this minute with ILs and the admin team, and coming up with some ideas and possibilities of what we can do with Monday to accommodate the, whether it's small group projects or labs or, events that are appropriately distant and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, we're looking at trying to do whatever we can to open up a little bit more, especially on those Mondays.
Okay. One of the things that we had been promised before this school year had started was kind of a frequent surveying of families in terms of progress and measuring the quality of the programs. So what are we thinking about as we look to reopening and having these alternate models in place in terms of measuring the quality of instruction, the quality of curriculum delivery through either option?
Well, I know that the surveys were generated at the district, and I'd be positive that, especially as we transfer into a new model, that we'd be trying to get the input as quickly as possible so that we can monitor and adjust what we have, and add some of the suggestions that we're hearing from parents and families.
Okay. Let's see. There's definitely been a reaction in our community. And I'll read this comment that came in. I understand there are petitions from students and teachers regarding not going forward with the model the board voted to implement. Could you tell us what the latest status is?
No.
Okay.
I don't know of those.
Okay. Okay, so Brent, let's see, I think those were my questions. I am going to open up chat. Let's see how I can do that. And I realize you only have a couple of minutes left. I will stay on for another 15 minutes to address anything I can. So if anybody has additional questions, please let us know. You can now enter them in chat. Okay, let's talk a little bit, Brent, before you leave, about the cap rate for Paly. Is it by grade level? Is it 30%? What are you thinking right now?
Well, it's around 30%. Yeah, we've been talking anywhere between 30 and 40%. Again, it's going to take us to know who the students are and quickly look at what we can do to make it work. And I think it's going to be decided soon after that. So everything's kind of it's going to come together all at the same time. We just can't move forward until we know exactly who wants to be part of it.
Okay, great. I think, Brent, I know you need to go to your student session. So any other closing remarks? Otherwise, I will continue on and try and do what I can with our community.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I'm seeing the remarks that it's unfortunate that I can't be here to keep going, and I'm sorry, but I need to speak to our students because I haven't done that yet, and that's what today's designed for. So I'm sorry about that, and we can maybe add an additional time next week if people have more comments. So it's not that I don't want to, because I know that there's lots of questions, and I spend lots of my time this entire week answering them in different venues. So I'm always willing to continue doing that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Brent. And just for the community generally, we are tracking all of the questions. We have drafted an FAQ, and we will get that FAQ out to you this afternoon. And any new questions that come in, that will be a living document. So we will continue to work on that and put answers in. That is something that we are actually collaborating on with Gun and with the other middle school PTAs. So we're trying to be consistent and answer what we can. Some of the information is definitely fluid. I will start going through some of this. I personally only have another 15 minutes, so I will try and do what I can here. Let's see. Students and teachers are all, and families are all having strong reactions. I think we need to see what happens over the course of the next couple of days. I can tell you that from a PTSA perspective, we are engaging in advocacy around some of the things that have concerned us the most, particularly class sizes. And there are other things there, and I can I'll be able to share more of what we're doing a little later on today. Live streaming. So live streaming was not considered during this proposal creation because the teachers union was strongly against it. And in the staff survey that was sent out a couple of weeks ago, the staff reaction was pretty strongly against it. So due to those opinions, the district office told the secondary principals, come up with a plan. And this was announced at that board meeting, not the most recent one, but the one before that, that they will try and figure out the math and figure out how they can work with the master schedule to come up with an option to bring students back on campus without live streaming. And so that was their marching orders from the district. This point about looking at why we would do this if we're headed towards purple and not able to open schools, that is also something that the PTA is aggressively pursuing and trying to get answers to. We fully recognize that this is a lot of disruption, and there is some probability that we might not even be able to open in January. And I don't think it's necessarily true that one way or the other teachers would, you might have a better chance of keeping your teacher. I think primarily the classes where teacher changes are anticipated are only really in English and social studies. And those classes were also chosen because it's easier to cohort, and there are multiple sections typically taught by the same teacher. I know that there's some outstanding questions about APUSH in particular, where we only have, I think, either one or two teachers for that, and I will try and get that addressed in our FAQ. And the home classes who choose hybrid learning, those classes are going to look like what they look like today. So if your student is taking Algebra 2, that Algebra 2 class is going to look exactly very similar to what it looks like today. You might see a couple of students come in and out of the sections. You might see that particular class change period, but and students might shuffle from one section to another, but the class itself will look very similar, and it will be synchronous. Let's let's see, what will be, I think triggers about going back to broader students in person. I believe this model that is being considered is for the entire semester. I think then beyond that, we're looking at the next school year, possibly summer classes, and that will be entirely dependent on what's happening at the county level and in terms of health and other guidelines. Let's see. I will pursue with Principal Klein this idea of at least identifying 2 to 3 teachers that a student really wants to keep and using that as a pivot point in the master scheduling process. The master scheduling process is going to be done entirely by hand. So it's not like they're just throwing everything up in the air and dumping it into the program again. It's not like that. They're going to really take each schedule hand by hand and see what they can do to avoid disruption. Labs and science classes, as Principal Klein mentioned, some of that discussion is happening right now. What I have heard about labs is that there's a concern about keeping the equipment clean and sanitized between students. So they're still trying to work through some of that. I also know that our science building isn't completely open yet. So that might be factoring into some of those decisions. And I do not know what the timeline is on that construction project and how soon it will be ready to use. And I will try and seek answers to that. I think there might be some opportunities around science and labs in more of a demo format. And I think that that is the kind of conversation that's happening with the ILs around how to restructure Mondays. If someone contracts COVID or someone is homesick, yes, they would need to work with their teachers individually through Schoology to access their learning for that period of time. We don't know. It might be up to the individual teacher if they want to turn Zoom on from their classroom. That might still be an opportunity. But again, I think it would be up to the individual teacher. I've talked about live streaming. So for the social justice students and for team, really, I think the teachers were considered and talked to about this, but what I understand is the best way for them to ensure that grouping of students was to offer it only and maintain that teacher consistency there was to offer it only as distance learning. Let's see. Yes, there are some.
Hi, Charu.
Yeah.
My
Sorry,
question,
let me just try and get through a couple questions, Radhi. I'll open it up in 1 second.
I think you addressed my question, but it was not the question that I asked actually.
Sure. What was that? Go ahead.
That SJP and teams are essentially being forced to take distance learning because of whatever reason. And, there are students there who want to go back, who don't even have the option. So I'd like to understand what sort of options are there for those students to have some in-person interaction and social interaction, because you're essentially cutting them off.
So I, my understanding is whether it's social justice and team or any other distance student, they are working hard to figure out those opportunities to bring students back on campus for tutorials, for learning opportunities, for social activities. I think within team and within social justice, I would encourage students to work with their teachers to identify additional opportunities. I know that team has come back on campus and had some orientation type activities already. So I think this comes back to those individual groups. And I would really encourage students, the big difference here between secondary and elementary reopening is that our students have a voice and they can really advocate for themselves and push some of these models forward. up until now, the answer I had been receiving from the administration had really been these in-person opportunities really depend on the teachers. And I think we now have to, we as parents and we as, and for our students, we need to work directly with our teachers fundamentally to make sure that some of these opportunities exist. I know it's not a satisfying answer. I'm sorry.
No, it's not, because teachers are the ones who have been kind of quite resistant to the opening plans. So I don't know.
I will,
And I mean, not just
there is some of this that is we're going to try and address at an advocacy level through PTAC in terms of ensuring that there are in-person opportunities for everybody.
yeah, I mean, if we're saying that, I don't see how this plan addresses the primary objective really of addressing mental health.
I only have a few minutes.
Yeah, sorry. No, go ahead.
I understand there's a
yeah.
lot of discontent. I really understand that. And I encourage you, I am reading every single email I get. I think by now all of you know how to reach me, but I will put my email in here. And I'm not only reading every email, but I'm responding to every email. But so please let me know. Let's see does anybody have any questions? I cannot really answer what's going on around live streaming. Right now, it is not an option that is being pursued by the district. And that is an answer that has come from the district office. So it is really challenging to work even at the site level to try and move beyond that. I think there are discussions that are happening. I would like to see streaming be an option for teachers to use, particularly when it comes to quarantine plans, even within this model. And I don't like using the word streaming. I actually like using the word concurrent classroom or HyFlex better, but and we're going to try and make that information that we have collectively gathered available to people, and we're going to still keep marching down that path to try and keep that discussion alive. Let's see. Does anybody else want to jump in and ask any questions?
Yes, Charu,
yes.
Who's working on the master plan?
It will be the guidance team. Michelle Steingart is the assistant principal in charge of guidance. And it's the entire guidance team. It's the grade level counselors. I think it's mainly them.
Okay. And do you know why the teachers are against the concurrent classroom?
So I personally believe, this is my opinion, that we don't have a common understanding of what we mean. And I think that when they were asked the question, they were not told what the alternatives would be. So I think it's unfortunate that our principals actually and assistant principals spent a couple of weeks building a plan and moving forward with it and presenting that at the board meeting without us having had that common sort of discussion and conversation. The teacher opposition I have heard is about supporting students in both modalities simultaneously and the impact to the quality of instruction, and that nobody really gets served in that model. While I think that is an absolutely valid concern, I think there might be opportunities to address that. The other concern I've heard is a lot of the examples that have been put forward are for private schools with much, much smaller classes, that where you might have 6 students in a classroom and 6 students remote. And it's very different when you start thinking about employing that dual modality with 30 students and having 15 in front of you and 15 remote. I'm not saying, I am just repeating what I've heard. I am not saying I necessarily agree or think that these are not insurmountable concerns. The other concern I've heard is about behavior and managing behavior in the classroom, and that might get, so it's a concern around privacy fundamentally. So that's just kind of the things I've heard. And our teachers union has just been very strongly opposed to it and strongly opposed to exploring it. Okay, any other questions? We're at 9:15.
Hey, Charo, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Erin.
Hi, just a quick clarification that nobody seems to be wanting to talk about is this notion that they're in a cohort of 30 to 60 students, which leads parents, I think, to assume that their kid might be interacting with up to 59 other students on campus, and that's not true from what we know, right? It's only 15
Yeah,
that
let me
stay
clarify that.
together from English to history.
Yes, let me clarify that. As you said, Erin, it is 15 students, and those 15 students will be at school in a pair block. So they'll do English 1, period 1, and then history period 2 as an example. And either those 15 students will move from one classroom to the other, or they will stay in the same classroom. Not quite sure yet how that's going to work out. But at a minimum, they'll have 2 teachers. So we have 15 students in one room, 15 students in another room, swapping 2 teachers. That's already 30 now, and or a cohort of 30. So if one person in that cohort of 30 tests positive, they would have to quarantine that whole cohort of 30 because the teachers are moving from room to room. Now, those 2 teachers might also be teaching another hybrid block in the afternoon. I don't think those 2 teachers would be teaching 3 hybrid blocks. They would only be teaching up to 2 hybrid blocks. So your quarantine cohort is 30 to 60. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I need to draw it out on a slide.
No, I understand the quarantining cohort issue. It's just that I think parents have this understanding that their kid is going to get all this socialization on campus, and it's really only 14 other kids.
Yeah, it's 14 other kids in the classroom. But there's a passing period, there's a shared bathroom. I think, and the way the model has been designed, it's really not designed for people to hang out and have break times together or lunch periods together. Maybe there's some interaction before school starts or before that period block starts or after, but it's really not been designed like that. There will be, I know that there are bike racks by grade level. There are going to be entry and exit points by grade level. At our site, we are looking at specific buildings that are designated by grade levels. So while I think the main in-room experience is dedicated to 15 students, I think there is still a wider circle that could be drawn around that as a daily reality. Okay, I can probably take just 1 or 2 other questions.
Hey, Chara, this is Rich. So I have a question about instructional minutes. I think of that as being teacher in front of students, either online or in a classroom. But so why have those numbers gone down? And now they're talking about kind of changing Mondays, and I'm kind of concerned that will even become like a homework assignment.
So
I'm just really worried about not having enough lectures.
Thanks for that comment, Richard. So the instructional minutes from Tuesday to Friday are not changing. The class periods associated with live instruction are still exactly the same. In terms of Mondays, they are fully aware of what the guidelines are around instructional minutes, and I believe that they are going to try to identify better opportunities for in-person or live instruction during those times. Many schools have a day that is asynchronous today. So it's a known program, and I'm fairly sure that when it comes to the legality of it, they would have a defensible state.
Right, and I'm not worried. I believe so as well, because but that's actually my concern, is that I don't even understand why we reduce the number of hours from
because students spoke very loudly and families spoke very loudly about the fact that Mondays are generally not working for anybody. They're not very useful. Half an hour periods are not yielding any progress in terms of.
I also agree. I thought that was silly to begin with, and I thought, okay, this first semester it was teachers were getting figuring out how to do online teaching, but then we could go back to a regular schedule. Why are we losing all the hours?
Yeah, I think they're thinking about that as an opportunity for Mondays as well, moving back to an odd and even model or something. I don't know, but I know that that's on the drawing table.
Okay.
Okay, guys, I really need to go. So I really appreciate it. Carl, I want to end the meeting, but I need to just capture the chat. So, okay, and I can't do that. Okay.
You have it saved?
Not yet. Just give me a second.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome, everybody. Again, look out for more communications from me about the Paly FAQ, and we'll try and get another Q&A session set up. And I'm really sorry that Brent had to leave early, I think, but he is going to go address our students before their classes start. So.